Hey everyone, welcome back to the Homestead. I'm Cynthia, and today we're going to be discussing emergency medical kit boxes for goats specifically. I may not know everything there is to know about homesteading, but one thing I do know pretty darn well is goats and how to take care of them. So stick around. We're going to go through my entire medical kit, one item at a time. A lot of these items are off-label, like most medications are for goats, unfortunately. I'm going to go through every single one of them, tell you about the medication in the description box below, what the dosages I use, and because a lot of them are going to be different and off-label. And do please keep in mind, I am not a veterinarian. This is not advice that you should just take. You should, of course, always do your own research, make informed decisions, consult with your veterinarian. If you are lucky enough to have one that knows anything about goats, that's pretty rare. And just, this is my advice or what I would do in certain situations for my animals. And if you decide that that's what works best for you on your homestead as well, fantastic. If not, everyone does everything a little bit differently. So just make whatever choice that you feel is in the best interest of you and your herd of animals. Okay, let's see what we have here. I think I'm going to start with what I think is the single most important medication that you can have in your medicine box, and that is going to be fortified B vitamins. Fortified B vitamins are what you need in order to ward off goat polio, which it's not actually polio. It's kind of a ridiculous name if you ask me. It's actually a vitamin deficiency. If you go on and you Google thiamine deficiency in goats or goat polio, you will find loads of information about that disease, but it is probably one of the fastest killers if your animals get down to it. I lost a goat to that years and years ago. That entire situation actually inspired this entire box. And if you can get pure thiamine, I believe that's vet prescription, that's great. But otherwise, get yourself a bottle of this. This is Vita-Jec B-Complex fortified B vitamins. I get this at North 40 is where I shop for most of my medications. You should be able to get this at TSC, any of those. It's in your general farm supplies. It's not a vet prescription necessary. And specifically, it has thiamine hydrochloride. It has 100 milligrams in there. You don't want anything with anything less than that. And an injection of this can save your animal. This is not something that you want to find out at 7 p.m. on holiday weekend that you need and not have. What else do we have in here? Everyone needs a great big bag full of various size needles and syringes for doing things like injections. I like to keep a variety on hand, 3 up to 20 mils. Even down, yeah, 3 milliliters is probably the smallest syringe you need. You really don't need anything smaller than that. And then I work with 20 gauge 1-inch needles. I find those to be probably the most universal needle size that works for all of our animals. It punctures the skin well. It's large enough that more viscous materials, like perhaps a bottle of penicillin, can be pushed through as quickly as you can without being such a large needle. You don't want needles to be super, super fine because you would think logically, oh, smaller needle, smaller ouch, but in reality, it makes it harder to push the liquid through, and so you're more likely to have issues where an animal freaks out and pushes you away, and then you have to start from square one, which makes nobody happy. Let's see, a big saber too is also going to be a great big bottle of ammonium chloride. This is going to save your male animals from urinary calcium deposits, which comes from having an imbalance of calcium to phosphorus in your feed. This animals at most risk for that are males who were castrated before 8 to 12 weeks old. Their urinary system is going to be smaller because of the removal of those sex hormones that they need to fully grow and mature. They can get calcium, or they can get mineral deposits in their bladder, which can then get trapped in the penis, just like we have kidney stones in humans, and that can cause a blockage and kill them. Ammonium chloride, when dosed appropriately and only given at times of issue, can dissolve those stones and save your animal's life. Oh! Being attacked by my box. It's always good to have at least 2 different classes of wormer on hand at any given time, most specifically because of barber pole worms. I will link below to some really good information about wormers and how to use them appropriately in goats. This is, again, one of those medications where it's labeled for horses, and you can't go by the dosage recommendations on the carton because of the much faster metabolism of goats. And 2 classes of wormers will be given at the same time, 12 hours apart, to save an animal from something like barber pole worms in an emergency situation. In an ideal situation, you would be sending off a fecal, or you would have your own microscope to do your own fecal. Literally a kid's microscope with 100 times focus. You could do your own fecals. There's YouTube videos for that. Maybe I'll make one. Maybe not. I'm not good at those yet. But needless to say, you'll want to actually identify the parasites that are in your herd and worm specifically for those parasites only at a time when the parasite burden is too much for your animal to handle. That is, of course, the gold standard. But it's always a good idea to have wormers from 2 different classes on hand just in case something goes sideways in a hurry. Antibiotics. I currently only have Bio-Mycin on, which is an oxytetracycline injection. I do need to get another bottle of penicillin or Pen-G. These are the sort of medications that will save your animal's life if they have bacterial pneumonia, which can happen a lot, especially in the transitions for seasons when it goes hot, cold, hot, cold. For some reason, that tends to inspire infections and upper respiratory infections in animals. The dampness, the weather changes, I think it just weakens the immune system. That's my opinion anyway. But having an antibiotic on hand so that you can reduce the load of burden on your animal, reduce that fever, and reduce symptoms until you can get help is very important. Because again, if this happens at 10 o'clock at night, they may not make it until 10 o'clock in the morning when the vet can come. Speaking of fevers, goats can have children's ibuprofen or ibuprofen in general. Liquid is easier to give than solid, but I mean, you do what you can and do with what you have. I can again put down the dosage recommendations by weight in the description box below. Hand sanitizer is always great for us because we end up with some pretty goopy, nasty moments out on the homestead. You're gonna want something to quickly sanitize yourself. Probably, again, one of the most important medications that you can have in your vet box is Bloat. Bloat, I've only ever had to use it once, thank goodness. Works a trick in order to reduce bloat and foamy bloat specifically in goats. So for anyone who's had goats for any amount of time, you know how deadly and sudden bloat can come on, especially frothy bloat, and it can be extremely difficult to save the animal or relieve the animal. People have tried things like laundry detergent and vegetable oil and item upon item to reduce the frothiness of the bloat so that the animal can find relief and not literally have their intestines pop. There's no need for any of that. This is an inexpensive medication that you can order on animal supply stores, online or in person. Should have this, and this makes life so much easier. The dosaging is quite easy. This is one of those items where you can just run the dosage based on what the label actually suggests. Next up on our list is calcium drench. Is something that you can use to treat hypocalcemia in your late stage pregnant goats. Hypocalcemia in goats is kind of akin to preeclampsia in people. So some of the symptoms are swollen ankles, lethargy, not eating as much as far as goats go, not humans. And this can save a life. This can also treat milk fever in freshly postpartum female goats. So their calcium is again so low that they become ill. And a little dosage of this, which this actually is one of my few goat-specific medications, so it's labeled for appropriate for use. The only thing is you are gonna wanna mix this with a hefty amount of water and a sweetening agent of some kind. It's extremely caustic. It burns like a mother trucker going down. The more you dilute it though, the easier it is to get down the animal. Of course, in that respect, you also have to put more into the animal, which can be challenging. But the burning sensation, oh my gosh, it's really awful. So I dilute it with probably like 12 to 16 ounces of water. And then I add a big old spoonful of molasses to it and then drench that. It's just, I feel like it's the kinder solution. This can also help if your animal is having ineffective contractions. Calcium is a really great way to help a mama goat who's exhausted and whose contractions are not producing babies. They're not effective contractions. Of course, it's always most important to, before you give something like this, reach in and check for fetal positioning, because it could be that baby is stuck. And if baby is stuck, there's no amount of powerful contractions that are going to help that situation. Let's see, what do we have next here? Oh, this is actually the most important item in this box. I think I've said that a couple of times though. A thermometer. A thermometer is going to tell you so much about what's going on with your animal. Is it a high temp? Is it a low temp? Those are two big things that can change what you diagnose your animal as. Another great one, baby temperatures. When you have your newborn baby goats, if they suddenly go down and their temperature is below 100 degrees, they can't suck, swallow effectively, and they can't digest milk. So you need to get them up above 100, 101 degrees, because the normal temperature for a goat is between 102, 103 degrees. Anything higher than 103 would be considered a fever in a goat. You want to get them back up to that at least 101 range before you try to give them anything by mouth. So that really is the most important thing. Every goat owner should have a dedicated thermometer, especially since it goes up the goat pooper. Really, really important, copper boluses. It is really, really difficult to get your goats up to where they need to be for either copper or selenium. Most minerals don't have enough copper or selenium, and most pastures are so deficient that you end up having to bolus them a couple times a year. There's a lot of symptoms for copper deficiency, sparse hair, seemingly to having a harder time managing parasites. Higher levels of copper in the digestive system can allow their bodies to fight off parasitic infestations better. So thin, sparse coat, dull, listless hair, balding around the tail and around the eyes and around the mouth area. Especially for darker colored goats, they kind of get this coppery, orangey, color to their coat. And then a couple of these babies, I usually put them in like a little fold of, in a little fold of bread or a fig Newton, or stuff it inside of a marshmallow to get them to eat it. Contrary to popular belief, it does not matter if these things go down whole or if they chewed up and swallowed, just they need to get in there. I think I copper bolus my goats twice a year, pretty much on average. This, just like in my video of treating lice and mites in chickens, is my bottle of Ivermectin Pour-On for cattle. The Ivermectin Pour-On for cattle bottle is really not that great, especially if you're trying to use small dosages, which is what you would do for goats or chickens or whatever you're trying to delouse. I find a dropper tincture bottle, which you can get a dime a dozen on Amazon for, is a much easier way to dispense the medication. Alcohol prep pads are of course very important. You want to use an alcohol prep pad on the top of any bottle that you'll be taking injection from both before and after you drop the medication. And that is just the top portion of my box. In here we have the bigger bottles of things. There's actually not a lot in here. Soluble colostrum powder. Anybody breeding goats should have colostrum powder in case the worst happens and you lose a mama goat. Colostrum is so vitally important for babies the first few days of their life. It's better to have this and not need it than need it and not have it, especially late at night on a weekend when North 40 or whatever farm stores closed. We also have milk of magnesia. Did your goats just get into a giant bag of chicken feed and now you need to flush their system before they end up disrupting their rumen and getting really sick or bloating? Milk of magnesia is what you want. Of course, again, all the appropriate dosages for the off-label medications, or at least the dosages that I choose to use based on my research, will be in the description box below. So check that, write it down if that's something that you choose to go with. This has helped me before, back before we got hot wire fencing, back when we first got goats, and they kept testing all of our defenses and were found lacking multiple times until we really got the thing buttoned up tight. This helped us prevent a lot of issues on the homestead. All right, another fantastic thing to have in your kidding kit, especially for babies, is a hairdryer. If you are blessed enough to have electric out to your barn like we do, a hairdryer can be a fantastic way to quickly dry off cold, wet babies, and this can be a lot more useful than hand towels for drying off kids. So if you have electric in your barn, have a hairdryer. Doesn't need to be an expensive one. I got this one at the Goodwill for like $1. Okay, next. Big old bottle of Chloride. This is the medication that you would use if your animals had a high amount of Kika, which is a parasitic little invader that can cause really, really profuse diarrhea, especially in baby animals. This is not one of those things that you want to just use liberally. You want to save this as the big guns when you're really sure you know what you're dealing with. This is another one of those things where you can send in a fecal to WSU or another local college or veterinary school near you, or to your local vet to find out if this is a medication that you need to be using in the moment. And it's one of those medications where if suddenly it becomes emergent, you don't want to be caught without. Mineral oil has multiple uses. It can be used as a lubricant if you need to go elbow deep on a goat who seems to have a stuck baby when giving birth. It can also be great for reducing bloat in goats. I would definitely prefer TheraBloat over mineral oil for those purposes, but I mean, why not have both? Second to last item in the box here. We're getting to the end and the label has fallen off this, but this is an iodine wound spray. And so every baby goat that is born on our farm gets iodine to the navel to prevent joint ill or to prevent infection of the umbilical cord. So feel free to Google those terms. You will find out lots of information about that. All of these illnesses that I'm mentioning are definitely things you should be Googling and reading up on now, not when you end up with a problem that you need to diagnose. Then lastly, we have 50% dextrose sterile solution. And this is for one of those situations where you have a goat that's down and you think that the issue is they need a boost of sugar for some reason, that they need a boost of energy. This is what you would use for that. This is definitely a higher order skill medication that I haven't even had to use yet, but it's one of those things I wanted to have on hand. Yeah, this is one of those things that you hope you never have to use, and that you definitely want to research in how to use before you end up needing to use it. So that is all. Oh, that's not all. There are 3 items that I currently do not have in my box that I do need to stock up on. Number 1 being a bottle of activated charcoal capsules. So when we first got our homestead, my herd queen, Piper, the beautiful face and the icon of all of our videos, my sweet old lady goat, she, when we first got the property, we had all of the goats, we were just walking around the property, and she got into rhododendron. Rhododendron is wildly poisonous to goats. I popped several activated charcoal capsules down Piper's throat to neutralize the toxin, and it saved her life. So that's one of the items that I need to restock. Two others I would like to have on hand would be Banamine, which is a much more effective and animal-specific fever reducer. However, that of course does require a vet prescription. And I would also really love to have a bottle of Bose, B-O-S-E. Feel free to look it up. It is a selenium and vitamin E booster, which is really important for babies, especially in Washington State. We are so deficient in selenium, and selenium deficiency in kids generally presents as weak, floppy kids that can't stand well or whose joints bend the wrong way. And it can be really unfortunate, and the selenium gel that you can get from over the counter in an animal supply store or a livestock supply store can help, but you need so much more of it that is even on the label for it to actually fix or prevent something like that. It doesn't pack enough of a punch. But both the Banamine and the Bose, the vitamin E and selenium injection, require veterinary prescription, which I don't currently have access to. They also are pretty expensive. So if you guys want to help us out, you can go ahead and head over to our farm store and buy soap and other goodies and help support the farm so I can upgrade my medical kit. Okay, anyway, well, I think that's about it as far as my first aid kit goes. This is just me, how I do things, and the things that I have. If you can think of anything that maybe I'm missing that you would like to see me have on hand, or that you have on hand that I may not have thought about, comment below. Let me know if there's anything in this box that you have questions or concerns about. Feel free to converse about that in the comments or ask me. I will do my best to reply to any comments. Or come over to our Facebook or Instagram page and we can have discussions there as well. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel to get more content like this. Have a great one, everyone.